First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi, host of Tier Talk. I have a very interesting topic coming your way. It's something that we're going to explore a little later on when I can hopefully get Gary York, Russ Hamilton, and Keith Helwig to sit on this with me. It's about when someone breaks policy, but it's done on good intent. In this case here, it would be done to save an inmate's life or to save a fellow staff member's life. When we come back from our sponsor, I'm going to go ahead and give you an example of a story I remember in which an officer broke policy to save an inmate's life. And these are going to be topics that we're going to discuss in the near future with my guests. All right, guys, so if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for you, brave men and women that work that front line. So please subscribe, interact. I got that community board up and going. And then when you subscribe, don't forget to hit that bell. That bell's going to notify you every time I post up a video. I stand by for our sponsor.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Thank you guys for listening to our sponsor. So again, this is a topic I want to discuss when I have the guys on board, talking about violating policy, but there's a good intent. You're looking to save a life. But I'm going to give you one of the scenarios, and we touched on it before. You're an officer, you're doing a tour, and you peek into one of the cell doors and you see an inmate getting ready to take their own lives, whether it's with a sheet around their neck or they fabricated some type of weapon to cut their wrist. And the moment you see this, you call that code. And you wait for the response, but the response isn't coming. So you call the code again. The response still isn't coming because the reason why you're calling that code is because you cannot open that cell door unless you have someone with you, unless you have backup. And that is for safety and security reasons. So you're waiting for that team to come, but the team's not coming. And then you realize the team is tied up handling another code. So this officer, in the back of his mind, he's got an inmate right in front of him trying to kill themselves. And he's thinking, I can't open that cell door because what if it's a setup? What if it's a setup? Can't open that door. But as time starts to go on, he starts to think of the other scenario. What if it's not a setup? What if this inmate really is trying to take their own life? And you know, we as correctional officers, we kind of took this profession because we want to help and because it's in us. We feel that impulse to help and we do what we can to help. So in this case here, the response team is not coming at this point, and this officer makes a choice that most would see as foolish. He opens the cell door, and thank God it wasn't a setup. And he manages to save this inmate's life by stopping the inmate from taking his own life. Supervisor finally makes it to the scene. And the officer knows maybe he shouldn't have opened up that cell door. But again, he had the impulse because that's the type of people we have in this profession where we have that impulse to save a life, no matter what that life has done. That's who we are, and that's what we do. And the supervisor sees this. And the supervisor is presented with a conflict. He saved that inmate's life, but in the process, he may have violated safety and security. So in an effort not to condone that type of behavior, the supervisor writes the officer up. He disciplines the officer to remind the officer of the consequence of what that action could have led to. And again, most of us could understand why the supervisor did what they did, why they wrote him up. But also, most of us could also understand why the officer did what they did, why they took that risk. Some would say, you got to write him. Some would say, how could you write him? Thing is, we have these policies in place, and that policy is a very important policy. That policy is in place for safety and security. Before I open up a cell, I need backup. But for the officer, the resources weren't there for him to open that cell door. So they had to make an action because of the limited resources that were available. So do we have policies in place that don't give us the resources to abide by those policies? Because that's a question that's going to be brought up. Or could we have done something to limit that impulse of that officer to open that cell door? If that officer cannot open that cell door without backup, then why does the officer have the keys to begin with? Are we protecting our officers in an effort so the officers can protect themselves? Basically, are we protecting the officers from their need to act? Because again, that's what's in us. And these are part of the discussions that we're going to have when I get these guys at the table. And we also want to discuss when an officer violates policy to protect another officer and the conflict. And we're going to do it from multiple perspectives. Frontline, administrative, investigative. It's going to be a good dialogue. But I hope this dialogue will create an understanding of the complicated issues that we face every day. I think it's going to be interesting. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe. Hit that bell. That bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. All right, guys, stay safe.